So today we're going to look at how Conor McGregor was able to pick apart Marcus Brimage. I really want to talk about how he was able to use angles in this fight. He really was able to hit Brimage moving in, take an angle, and end up in a safe place where he was able to strike and Brimage was not. So let's talk about why it's even important to take angles in a fight. This leaves your opponent without a set target to attack. It puts you in a prime position to attack where your opponent is at a disadvantage. When fighting an aggressive fighter, it gives this bull and matador type effect where you're able to evade a striker's or an attack of your opponent. And it also helps you get an escape route so that you can safely disengage from an exchange after striking. So with that in mind, let's get started. Here's Conor McGregor and Marcus Brimage. Brimage moves forward here, and he's unable to hit McGregor. And we see McGregor land a shot and get off on an angle very nicely. So this is a great example of McGregor's ability to create an angle after striking. In this instance, it's as a counter to Brimage moving forward aggressively. McGregor shuffles backward to maintain a comfortable distance. He then uses a pull motion or a pull in which he shifts his weight back onto his rear foot. This moves his head and his hips back out of the way of Brimage's right hook and allows him to safely evade the strike. Notice during this pull motion, McGregor doesn't lean back too far with the upper body and leave himself in a poor position. He's still in a situation where he can strike effectively. He then throws a left cross as he plants his rear foot. This is also known as an anchor punch, which was made famous by Muhammad Ali. He then uses a lateral replacement step known as a J-step, which allows you to cut at a 90-degree angle and forces your opponent to stop his attack and reposition himself before he can continue. So here we see McGregor create that distance and throw this anchor punch. Here we see McGregor has already taken a slight angle. This is illustrated by the center lines depicted on the picture here. This allows McGregor to land that anchor punch while simultaneously avoiding the overhand left from Brimage. The second visual that's depicted here is the circled foot of McGregor. This is where he plants that foot that makes the anchor punch what it is and what generates the power for the punch. So now let's take a look at this J-step that McGregor uses. He brings his lead foot back and uses a replacement step to step his rear foot out to his left. That left immediately changes to his back. So what I mean by that is he starts off by moving his foot out to his left, but once he readjusts his footing and transitions his weight, then that's actually back to him. That becomes the rear. You can see in these pictures that his center line changes quite drastically. This forces Brimage to stop his attack and adjust accordingly. Here we see McGregor use a nice little angle change to time and bait the overly aggressive Brimage. McGregor sidesteps to his right, and as his back foot plants, he feints the rear uppercut. Now, based on how Brimage has been responding to McGregor's striking with aggression, it's safe to assume that Brimage is likely going to do it again. McGregor was correct in his assumption, and Brimage responds aggressively with his head low as he has before. So after the feint, McGregor uses a slight angle back to his left and launches the uppercut. It doesn't land flush, but I like the way that McGregor set up and baited Brimage into moving where McGregor wanted him to. McGregor finishes by moving back to his left yet again. This allows him to escape from the exchange safely. So let's take a look at this clip here. It's a nice little exchange on McGregor's part, but it's not the hands that I want to be paying attention to, it's the escape route after the exchange. When we look at these still shots here, we see where McGregor enters the exchange and where he exits, and you see Brimage miss big time. That's not an accident. He's moving off on quite a drastic angle at the end of this exchange, and that's one of the reasons that he's able to frustrate Brimage and get away safely. Let's take a look here at this baiting motion that Conor is using in order to draw out Brimage's aggression. I'm going to take a minute here to explain these unusually lazy-looking jabs. McGregor's trying to bait Brimage here. He launches the jab and assumes Brimage is going to try and counter. On the first time, he looks for the left hook, but Brimage doesn't commit to his attack. McGregor then begins to rhythmically paw his jab. The intention behind this is to kind of lull your opponent into a false sense of timing and rhythm, likely in order to break that rhythm shortly thereafter. McGregor uses it in this case, however, to bait Brimage into attacking. McGregor seems to have Brimage's timing down pretty early, and he's also not really committing to these pawing jabs, so I would assume McGregor is pretty confident that he is going to be able to evade any kind of attack that Brimage brings in after these jabs. When Brimage does move forward here aggressively, McGregor uses a modified replacement step to move backward quickly and launch a left hook. The way that he throws this left hook is very similar to the footwork that he uses when he throws the anchor punch, in that planting his rear foot is what's generating the power for that punch. The replacement step that he uses here differs from a traditional backward replacement step, in that traditionally the front foot steps back, and before it touches the ground, the rear foot starts jumping backwards. The lead foot then lands where the rear foot just was and replaces the foot. The rear foot then takes a step back into a traditional stance. However, in this instance, McGregor stepped out to his left with his rear foot on the end of the replacement step. I believe he did this because he was anticipating Brimage throwing a left hook or an overhand left. So he stepped his rear foot out to his left, which would make it easier for his head to slip out to his own right in the case of Brimage attacking. This last segment here is the finish. It's pretty long here and there's a lot going on, so I'm going to break it down into a couple of different segments just so we can really dissect what's going on here. McGregor kind of ends this fight by using a combination of things he's used throughout the entire fight. He starts off by feinting a kick and then slipping Brimage's counter as he briefly switches stances to orthodox. He did this in order to move away and circle nicely from Brimage's attack. After he finishes circling away, McGregor lands a nice little broken rhythm jab cross. As I mentioned earlier, breaking the rhythm is a great way to attack your opponent or land strikes when your opponent is not set and therefore ready to defend or counter your attack. He then backs off as Brimage comes forward aggressively yet again. He uses some lateral movement here to try and deke Brimage out. This often is used by fighters to get their backs off the cage or the ropes, and or to land a drive-by or a sprint cross in which a fighter's lead leg moves forward on the cross rather than having both feet planted. This also keeps opponents from settling. This works really well against power punchers who need to sit down and plant their feet in order to gain power for their strikes. McGregor plants his feet and launches another uppercut that lands flush. He follows that by a cross hook. At this point, he recognizes that Brimage is hurt, so he plants his feet and lands another big rear uppercut and a spin-off left hook. This is when a fighter throws a hook, but he allows his back foot to move with the momentum of the punch in order to disguise an angle change while simultaneously landing a punch. He then throws an uppercut hook cross combination. On the final cross, he steps his back foot out to his left to take a minor angle. This is so that he's not directly in front of Brimage while he's throwing. The way he shifts his weight as he throws this cross again is very similar to that anchor punch that I mentioned earlier. He stomps his weight into the ball of his rear foot, and that's what creates the power for this strike. Again, his use of small angles while he's punching is what's most impressive throughout this fight. He continually makes small movements that force Brimage to change his position, and while doing so, land the strikes needed to finish the fight. This is the exact purpose of using angles. This is just a different angle where we see McGregor really pick apart Brimage here, and we see him draw out and really exploit Brimage's predictable reactions. Thank you very much for watching this film study. Please subscribe to my channel to stay up to date on the best combat concepts.